Hi, this is Patty Hodge, and this is Dr. Nurses Rock. And this video is part of a series of videos on the topic of grief that we're presenting throughout the month of April. Now, right here beside me, you see a familiar face because Miss Valerie Varan is back to talk to us. Valerie was so lovely and so informative the last time that we spoke, and it left me with so many questions. And I and I wanted to give her ample opportunity to explain some of the things that we really had left unanswered in our last video. So we had left off the last time, Valerie. We were talking about your experience as a spiritual experiencer, as energetically very sensitive, um, being thrust into these situations of tremendous grief, dealing with your mom and your husband, and then how you took care of yourself and coped in the end, or continued to cope with and take care of yourself. So now my question is, um, tell me something more about emotional constellations, because we touched on that a little bit last time.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Patty. Thanks so much for having me again
I'm
today.
so
It's
glad you're
such a
back here.
delight. So grateful to speak to you. And grief and loss is such a big topic, isn't it? There's so many facets to the grief and loss. And so, one of the things we were talking about last time is there are so many emotions that come up. And as we talked about how they have physical effects, right? These emotions can really create a lot of inflammation in the body, and that can have a cascade of physical effects. And we did talk about ways to start working on forgiveness so that we can kind of clear the energy and make way for healing. And then we kind of talked about talking to your cells and some other things. But let's talk more about the emotion constellation, because most people really don't think of their emotions very deeply. But here's the thing. So I mentioned last time rage, hatred, emotions that I've never felt before that all of a sudden were arising. I think we can all relate to anger, certainly, for so many reasons. But let's talk about anger and its emotion constellation. So imagine if we had a piece of paper in front of us. Let's say our viewers were doing some anger homework, if you will. Like, we psychotherapists love to assign homework. Why? Because when we're doing these things repeatedly, it really invokes the body to heal.
Right.
So imagine that we had a piece of paper in front of us and we were writing the word anger in the middle of the page. And maybe we put a little circle around it. And we were like, wow, I'm going to construct my emotion constellation of anger. And the significance of this is Charles Tart was a famous psychologist way back when that got very involved with things energetic and psychic, and he went deep down the rabbit hole. But what he noticed is consciousness. Um, it happens in states, and he started calling it same state consciousness. And when we're back in the same state, it evokes things. So then you ask yourself, why? Well, from that, I began to construct these emotion constellations with my clients so that they could see what their anger state really was. So imagine that anger is now on our piece of paper, it's in the middle of the page, and we have spokes coming from it. Spokes that cover all of the five senses, as well as maybe some secondary emotions and other things that might arise. But for example, sight. What are the things we might see that might hijack our body and send us into anger? For a lot of people, maybe they see people yelling, for example, right? Um, Maybe they see hospitals. I mentioned how there were so many things happening with my mother related to the hospital that I had such anger at the hospitals. Um, and so maybe even hospital is in their sight spoke related to anger. Are there some maybe you want to mention that would be sight related for anger?
I guess I'd have to think about that a little bit. Uh, if I was seeing someone harming someone,
Right? Like
bullying happening or something, or even something on television that we're exposed to that we're not even paying attention to, that's all the violence that's around us all the time. The headline.
ex- exactly, right?
Yeah.
Look at how many people are thrust into anger with these things that they're
Yes.
seeing, right? Beautiful, perfect. Thank you. So now, what about hearing sounds, right? For some people, um, anger again might be loud voices
Yes.
compared to soft voices. And they might not even understand that they are pulled into anger when someone is loud in their voice, even if they aren't angry. But it's triggering to this person. For some reason, it might, a certain song might have a connotation to them, might pull them right into anger. Especially, let's say someone's been abused and the abuser constantly was playing some song, or maybe the abuser was smoking cigarettes
Yes.
and smelled like a certain aftershave. So, in their um, anger constellation, in smell, in scent, would be those particular things. Um, so we covered what sense and sight and sounds. Secondary emotions might be irritation or might be frustration or might be it might start going down the rabbit hole towards rage. So sometimes it's helpful to notice when one emotion triggers, it can have this cascade effect, and we might be helpful for us to do it. But when we construct that emotion constellation in our example today of anger, it can really help us see why we're triggered. So let's say to listeners, last time I was talking about how rage and anger was coming up for me. And I had never really experienced those intensive emotions before. And I really had to do my own anger and rage constellation so that I could really truly see and hear myself, really understand what all might be in that state of consciousness that I now knew as rage or as hatred. And it helped me understand it more deeply so I could go about the healing process. Um, it also helps, like, for example, I can think of a gentleman that I'm working with. He had pretty much grown up, with a father, like so many fathers who were saying to this man, um, suck it up, don't feel emotions, no matter what kind of negative thing happens to you, no matter if you're abused, no matter what it is, suck it up, don't feel. So logic was his, huge coping skill and not feeling his emotions. So as we were starting to help him finally feel and help him feel it in the body, that became one of the spokes. Well, how does anger feel in the body? And what we also noticed was, oh, to most people, that would feel like frustration, um, not necessarily anger. And that ended up being helpful because now we could help him see, we were starting to help him see that there's a gradation and a spectrum to these. And if we can catch them earlier, so in the body, like we don't want to catch them when the heart is already racing and we're about ready to have a secondary emotion of panic attack. We want to be able to notice when our jaw is clenched and there's tension around our heart. And maybe our fists are starting to do this. We want to catch that early, not wait until we are bowled over. So anger has a certain thoughts to it. I have to defend myself was one of his, right? That's a biggie. And no wonder he was getting complaints of how defensive he constantly was being. And when we worked our way backward, it helped him understand that he, more often than not, is in the constellation of anger. Anger, as you certainly well know, and many of our viewers may have heard, right, is part of the fight, flight, freeze. Right. So notice that if we're angry, maybe we're ready to fight, and that helps us feel safer. For him, it has become a habit because now anger feels safe, and he's constantly going to anger to feel safe. But now it's having a negative cascade because then the thought is, I have to defend myself. So now his behaviors and that is another spoke, right? How does it feel in the body? That's a spoke that we fill out on our anger constellation. What behaviors is it calling me to do? That is one of the spokes. And so he can see where this defense is related to this same state consciousness. Like, this is what I'm thinking when I'm angry. And as we're helping him do this, we can help him then construct a calm constellation. We can help him construct a trust constellation. Because, for example, he is starting to realize he doesn't trust even feeling trust. So, no wonder he stays to anger. But as we help him really start realizing which environments, that would be another spoke, which environments am I in that helps evoke calm for me? Oh, now what is my body feeling like in calm? Oh, what music helps me feel calm? I think last time we were talking, I mentioned for some reason I was trying lots of things each night to cope. It was only the monk music, the Gregorian chants, that for some reason was helping hijack my body in a good way towards calm. It was having some kind of a vibrational effect. So as we start to understand what is my constellation around calm, we can pick one of those things as a way to get to calm, whether it's through the thoughts, through sense. What are calming scents? For some people, lately someone was saying the pitter patter of a light rain. So the sound and scent of rain, using aromatherapy, using sound therapy, that's a way to help calm the physical body, which then helps calm the mind. And when we calm the mind, the thoughts quiet, they lessen.
Right.
The more we are in anger, the more racing and the more intense, and the just the sheer number of thoughts are going to really spike. So this emotional constellation idea is really, really helpful. And it helps us pretty soon be able to see that there's a spectrum. And if we start to better understand what things are in our calm constellations, we can use them to cope. And we want to start coping, like let's say 0 to 10, 10 being anger. We want to recognize this as frustration in the body around 2, 3, or 4, certainly before 5.
Right.
Because we can, our coping mechanisms work better when we do them in the beginning, when we're starting to feel a certain way. It's way harder for the coping tools to work immediately when we start them at an 8, 9, or 10. Like, let's say my panic attack kinds of clients, right? If they're worked up into panic attacks, starting to do their coping tools at the 8, 9, or 10 when it's about ready to completely overwhelm their body, that's way harder for them. But we do have tools for that, so I might as well add one. Like, one of my favorite was for my clients. A lot of them liked the idea of focusing on their feet. If I focus on my feet right now, oh, I can feel the cool around my feet. I can feel my bare feet on the carpet. I can feel how the yarn feels. I can feel where the warmth is, right? We can go deeper. Well, I'm so now mindful of the carpet and my feet, I forgot what my thoughts were that were leading me into panic. Right. Whereas a lot of times people will steer people to focus on the breath. But the problem is, if we are already in anxiety and we've already been hearing therapists tell us, oh, quit breathing so fast, quit, oh, you're breathing too shallow. Oh, I'm supposed to breathe deep. Then a lot of anxiety can develop around the fact that we're not breathing correctly. So I started realizing that there's going to be some clients where taking deep abdominal breathing is very helpful, but other clients where it's not going to help for that reason because it just adds into the cacophony of the thoughts of what else they're doing wrong. And they needed something else. So the feet are far away from the brain, and it seemed to work really, really well for a lot of clients. So that's kind of the thing about emotion constellations, right? And then that's really nice when we can start our coping in the less than 5 instead of waiting to the higher numbers. I hope that helped.
It did help, and I love that idea. How would people begin to do that? They would have to do that with a therapist, or is there some kind of self-help way to do that?
I truly think that everybody can do this for themselves. Like
Okay.
truly draw out that constellation. Like literally, like for instance, if I take a piece of paper right now and I put a circle and I put anger and I'll hold this up, but then I'll draw the spokes on it, right? Okay,
Right.
that's where I'm starting. But now, oh, this is the body sensations. And these are the behaviors. And these are the sense. And these are the, let's say, the sights. And these are the environments. I'm starting to add more to it, right?
Yes, I see that.
And then I'm
What
going to
comes
add
to
sounds. What were you going to say?
my mind is when I was working with people who had addictions. And
Yes.
they would talk about people, places, and things, and then what they were when they would reach for their whatever substance of choice was, what was going on inside of them that would was contributing to them wanting to do that. Um, and a real clear one that came to my mind just as you were speaking was just reaching for a cigarette package. There's a
Mm-hmm.
whole ritual attached to that they got caught up in, right? Because the package has the wrapping around it, and then there's the tapping of the package if you're and the flipping it open and pulling all of those steps involved in doing that. And what sensation, what were they thinking when they needed to reach for that substance? So this is seems like it would reach across a whole variety of needs, paying attention to your emotion, paying attention to whatever craving you have, paying attention to whatever state of mind you happen to be in at any given moment.
Absolutely right. This has such usefulness across the spectrum, I think,
Yeah,
for
I see that.
therapists. And notice that the thoughts that we're thinking in anger can be very unique. Or let's say hatred. I hate him. Oh, he sucks at this, and he, like all these vile thoughts that we're having. And yet, what if that's our husband and we got ourselves so worked up? And yet, when we're in our love constellation, our thoughts are so opposite. And we're like, how could we even think that?
Yeah,
So that was the relevance to that same state consciousness that Charles Tart was talking about, because the logic in anger or the logic in hatred is very different than the logic in love.
right.
The logic in love wants to cooperate more, right? It wants to listen more. It wants to do things. It doesn't want to just defend and push people away and, like cuss people out and, the other kind of behaviors that we could fall into.
Right.
It's like we can do better than that. But if we really understand, like we're in grief and loss, like even around grief, do our grief constellation and do our loss constellation separately just to see how it might be unique. Because I think what you'll find is we are really like unique snowflakes. And so grief will have a little bit of a feeling to us when we say that word grief. And it pulls up sometimes things that are just a little bit unique than if we say loss,
Right.
loss. And in our body, loss. Ooh, I can feel the heaviness of that. I can feel how that really energetically pulled my body really thickly, and it kind of seemed like a down motion. Grief seemed more like horizontal. It didn't seem to plumb the depths as much as the word loss did when I energetically felt it. And so no wonder different types of thoughts might come and again help us understand, wow, I'm going through grief and loss. How do I really feel right now?
Right.
And what are all the things that I'm thinking of associated to feeling that way? And how do those thoughts, how are they related to my environment and what I'm seeing and hearing around me, right? This, if we do this kind of stuff, I did these kinds of things every single night just to get me through the day so I could process, right? Like it would have been nice to be able to process with a fellow therapist every single night, but it wasn't going to happen. But if I did this every single night and I could really see where I was going, or then I could really take my journaling to the next level.
Right.
Because now I'm really starting to understand every way that I'm feeling the emotion in the body, in every sense. There's something a little bit unique. Sometimes, we might repeat a word here and there, like rain might be in sound and in smell, but that's okay to notice, because if the cigarette example you gave, if a pack of cigarettes turns out they're in every single one of these emotions, I'm thinking about the cigarettes. I want to pick up a cigarette wherever behaviors is, right? I want to pick up a cigarette. Oh, this is how smoking feels in my body. You reminded me of sometimes when I was doing this related to someone who kind of wanted to quit smoking, and they realized that the smoking was helping them breathe deeply. Well,
Right.
now that they figured that out, they could more consciously just start breathing more deeply and switching to a different scent,
Yes.
like something that would have been related to a really positive emotion constellation for them.
This is also helpful, and I hope that people realize the gift that you're giving them today by just giving them this explanation. And I'm sure if they have questions, we'll encourage them to put them in the comments.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
I'm so grateful to you. We still have another question to ask. I wonder if I should invite you back, or do you want to try to approach it today? What do you
Oh,
think?
I'm game however you want.
Well, let's try it today. Although I do want you to keep coming back. So the other thing we said we would talk a little bit more about was energy boundaries.
Energy boundaries are a great topic. And I know last time we pointed to them, and I mentioned how in trying to get through the deep emotions in caregiving my mother, I really had to talk a lot to my cells as one type of an energy boundary, and we didn't have time to elaborate, so we'll elaborate. So let's back up for a moment. Energy boundaries, right? People might understand the concept of a physical boundary, like, oh, just say no. Oh, walk away, right? Oh, I mean, technically, even our clothing is a physical boundary between us and the sun.
Right.
Our skin is the boundary that we normally think of when it comes to us versus the environment. So when we think of the concept of boundary, we're really thinking of, where does the self end and other begin?
Right.
And if I'm in grief and loss, I might have discovered that my whole sense of self was caught up with my mother or my father, for example, right? A lot of people, and I think of the young people today, um, I've noticed that more than in previous generations, that the young people today have been raised with, I know in therapy we use the word enmeshment a lot. Sometimes the word might relate to someone, maybe they don't really think of it as enmeshment, but think of it when, if we've been in a family that really pretty much expects everyone in the family to show up every single weekend and to show up for every Sunday dinner and show up for every family event. And, every time and I'm making all these up right now, but every time mom wants to process something, she's going to call you. And every time dad thinks of needing things done around the house, he's going to call him. And it gets to the point where this boundary between us and other is blurred. So if we now lose someone and our boundary of self was very blurred and mixed up with this other person, that is going to open a whole nother avenue for things that we work on in therapy.
Right.
Because that person is going to have to get their own sense of self back. Now, in the last time we spoke, I was mentioning how one of the biggest grief and loss things that I was struggling with is I had become a therapist by like around the age of 40 in the first place, and it was spirit leading me in that direction, and I kind of didn't want to go there. So when I only had private practice about 10 years before feeling like now I had to go caregive, that was a big loss because I had now known, let's say, why spirit led me in the direction as a spiritually transformative experience, like a lifelong experiencer. I'm used to having these conversations with spirit, but since they were lifelong, I kind of get a bit irreverent. So the point being, at that point in time, as an experiencer, my identity was so mixed with my spiritual service to others. So now, if I'm not doing that, who am I? Like the identity gets affected. So when we're talking about setting energy boundaries, what we're really talking about is stepping back and realize, who am I? Key spiritual question. Who am I that exists even beyond space-time, between lives? Like, who am I that is not just this body? And then who is that other? And do I need a boundary? Do I need to shore up self? Well, in my case, I was giving examples of I certainly had to shore up self because my mother was there. I don't want to get into details, but I'll just say the kind of caregiving that I needed was I was starting to be used as the utensil that the only utensil she had now. She had a lot of, like, let's say, I'll just briefly say OCD, perfectionist, thoughts about how everything should be and the silver should be polished and it all has to look like this and company this and you better do that turkey right and no, he can't cook my meal because only you are clean enough to cook my meal. There were so many controlling things in her mental health that now that I'm caregiving, she can't do it. So apparently I'm supposed to do everything to her level and exactly the way she wants it
Oh
done.
dear. Yeah.
And you're going to hear it when it's not done that way over and over again. And so no wonder that no matter how many tools I have as a therapist, I mean that your boundary will be beat up.
Sure.
Right. And so no wonder part of my own work every single night was to readdress, like, what do I have to do to address my own physical sense of self and my energetic, who am I? Right. So no wonder, talking to myself was a way for me to even say, quit resonating with her. I don't want to feel every one of her feelings. So in a way, it was energetic, but it was physical. I was trying to say, physically stop resonating with her. And by the way, for our viewers, just real quick, what does resonance mean? Most people relate to that word, but I want to be clear that there's a real true energy thing that's happening when we start resonating with someone. And
Exactly.
really, our energies are going out in waves and they start syncing up. When they are swimming like dolphins, they start having a mutual vibratory effect on one another, and then they can entrain. So when, let's say, women are living together, no wonder their periods start falling into rhythm because of this whole resonance and entrainment concept. So I'll leave that for now. But energy boundaries. So now if we just kind of list before we end today, consider that, really think about who you are. What do you stand for? What are your essences? Like, what do you like? What do you dislike? That's going to give you all kinds of clues as to even what do you want to do for your self-care. Like it'll give you so many hints. And then the other, right? So first shore up yourself. And then sometimes you can decide energetically what kind of message do you want to send to the other. Now, technically, if I'm going to feel an energy boundary, like let's say I'm caregiving and I'm really frustrated and I'm like, I want this energy boundary. But if I say to myself, I want to feel it, I also want to say to myself, do I mean it? Because, for example, if like the person, maybe the hypothetical person we were talking about earlier, if I'm very enmeshed with family, then even the idea that I'm setting an energetic boundary will have a ricocheting energy effect in me because I don't really mean it. It's as if, and unfortunately, energy does follow thought.
Right.
So what happens is if I think I want to set an energy boundary, but I don't really mean it, then it causes leaks. And they're having equipment to start studying that lately. It's fascinating. But anyway, so we have to feel it and
Right.
mean it,
Right.
number one. Number two, I would say see it in our mind's eye what we want this boundary to look like. And the imagery we use can just be related to whatever meaning we give it. So, for example, if I really consider myself a spiritual person, and maybe for some reason the crucifix, the cross, is a calming symbol for me, then I could literally put crosses in my mind's eye all throughout my body. And it's amazing how that will calm, not because I'm seeing a cross, but because the cross has that meaning for me. And energetically, it's doing something. Or maybe someone has a holy figure that they like, and they might want to see that imagery as surrounding them and protecting their energy field. It's amazing how calming that will be. Or they might want to use their grandmother who passed 2 generations ago, and but that's a calming thing for them. It actually really works. In Qigong, we have something called the violet egg of protection. And it's amazing how many people who are experiencers are waking up to energy. And I just happened to mention the violet egg of protection from Qigong. And the other day, this guy went, "Oh my God, that was such a game changer." And he was talking about how it was a game changer for him. But then he actually runs, his role is kind of like a therapist, and he runs groups, and he shared it with the groups, and the groups were all like, this is a game changer. So the violet egg of protection is to literally see our whole energy field as if we're in a violet sphere, and then we shore it up with gold all around the edges. And I'll tell you, when I use that a lot, if I'm out on a walk and my energy starts zooming into someone who feels dangerous for some reason, I'll just put a violet egg of protection around me, and I'll put it around that person as well. I've done the same thing with me and my mother when I was caregiving. I needed to shore up my energy field, but I wanted her to have her own healthy one, but I wanted a difference. So I'm in a violet egg of protection, and so is she.
That's a wonderful imagery to leave people with today. I think that that's it's a gift. It's easy to imagine, and we want to give people tools that are helpful to get through all of the hard parts of life, and especially grief, because that's what the topic is this month. But
Yes.
they can take whatever you've given us today and into anything that they are facing later on in life. So.
Absolutely, because it's the littlest things sometimes that cause grief and loss, not even necessarily the passing of one of our
Exactly.
loved ones, right? Look at the people who are losing their jobs right now.
Yes,
Look at the number of people losing their finances right now. They aren't getting paychecks. Grief
exactly.
and loss has so many ricocheting effects.
Absolutely. And loss can about so many things in life. And people are walking around wounded and they don't even know that they're wounded, or they don't share the fact that something has harmed them, and it's really affecting their health and their well-being. So thank you so much for opening up some people's eyes today. We're going to say that a lot of this may be difficult to understand for some people, and that's okay. Take from this what works for you. Use your own discernment always. That's what I've said from the beginning of this channel, is always use your own discernment and do what is best for you. And Valerie, you are such a gift, and I appreciate every minute with you. And of course, I'm going to tell you that I want you to come back.
Oh, thanks so much, Patty. So delighted. Every conversation is golden with you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to say bye for now. Thank you so much. Bye bye now.
I know.